So welcome everyone, and thank you so much for your energy and your passion for our show. We appreciate so much when you are moved and guided to do so that you share our show with other people. We always find amazing authors and practitioners, healers, teachers, world leaders. I mean, we just look for the people that the common thread is that they're on fire for life. And I've been very excited to talk to Sandra Smith today because though I've had my Enneagram, I've got my number. I couldn't tell you what it is right now. But I know when you really use the tool, it's absolutely amazing and incredible. And I'm just telling myself I need to have it done again. Sandra Smith, welcome to the show. I'm so glad that you're here.
I'm delighted to be with you, Temple. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's just a pleasure.
Yeah.
And I'm telling everyone today that your book has just been out 8 days, and I just want us to dig right into it. So tell us about how it came about, because we know being an author of a book is it's a real big commitment. So
Mm.
tell us about your passion for the Enneagram. Go any direction you want to go.
All right. Well, thank you for the freedom.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, I will say that I first heard the word in 1991. I was in theology school at Emory,
Mm.
and that summer ended up on the staff of Ring Lake Ranch in Du Bois, Wyoming. And I walked into the dining hall one morning, and there was a Sister of Loretta from Chicago with a T-shirt on that said, "Hi, I'm a one." And I said, "Sister Agnes, I need to be a one. That must be the best. How do I do this?" And she left a book, and that got me started. And so once I graduated from theology school, I started a retreat ministry in Asheville, and then started to dig into the Enneagram a bit more, and decided to go for training with the narrative tradition. And at the time, it was Helen Palmer and David Daniels out of Berkeley, Palo Alto. And they taught the Enneagram in a very particular way. And I just loved it, Temple, because they would have people come up and sit on panels. They would say, "Okay, all the twos come up." And then one of them would lead the panel and ask them questions. So we got to hear directly from the people about the lived experience of their type. And it was
Mm.
just fascinating. And then you would see that, there might be 5 type 2s on a panel, and there were nuances. So it
Wow.
really brings home the point that the Enneagram is not about behavior, but how we take the world in, filter it, and process information.
Hmm. And
Yeah.
isn't it like from 1 to 9?
Yes, there are 9 unique
Okay,
perspectives, types
right.
1 through 9, and they're divided into different triads, but the Enneagram honors that we have 3 centers of intelligence, 3 brains, if you will, a head, a heart, and a body,
Hmm.
and there are 3 types that lead with one of those centers. And so that's good to know, because what we want is to have those centers of intelligence online. Usually one is not as accessible as the other two. So that's some of the growth.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I do
Well,
talk about that a bit in my book. Yeah.
it's like Stephen Covey with 7 Habits of Highly Effective
Mm.
People. It's like I think of that in relationship to your work. It's like you wouldn't just tell someone to come over and say, I want to build a house. And they go, well, what size and what do you want it to look like and what design? And they go, just do whatever. I trust the process.
Mhm.
Whereas without a blueprint, without a design, without a this is where the end is that I'll have in mind. And I love these types of tools.
Right.
The Enneagram, and it's the kind of thing that you're talking about. Like you can have, wonderful tools, but if you
Mhm.
just keep them in your toolbox, and I'm a living example of that. Now I've done the DISC program,
Mhm.
right? And we used it. We actually used it, and we would refer to it in our staff meetings. And I got to appreciate that that person's just gonna, I can walk in the room knowing they're gonna ask 10 questions because they are driven by the need to know. They may not ever use what they're knowing, but they
Right.
just have to know, or a
Mhm.
direct, dominating, or whatever. But I love what you're saying because the secret is, and if you are one of those people like Temple and you've had your Enneagram read, then pull it out, dust it off, and begin to use it because that's where you really learn. My teacher taught me in shamanism, if I'm telling you, you may or may not absorb it. If you're telling me, you've got it.
Well, it's like we say insights aren't transferable.
Mm,
And so we ask
wow.
questions, right?
Wow. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I don't know where my spiritual life would be without knowing my Enneagram type,
Mm-hmm.
because actually it's how I block my heart. It's the type structure, which is your ego structure,
Mm-hmm.
that can block our hearts from receiving and giving love. And if I know my type, then I know what the barriers are to an open-hearted living,
No.
uh, igniting my life, as you would say.
Mm-hmm.
And so we work with the patterns of this type structure so that we can begin to open and resist less and allow more, right?
So when you discovered this in 1991 and you had your aha, like, wow, was it at first something that you used on a personal level, or did you bring it into corporations, or describe your, I'm just very curious
Yeah.
because it's so evident when I read about you and was intrigued by you, I could tell that it's something, I mean, like me and Unity, for example, I may or not be into what they're into organizationally or anything, but I'm so committed to the teachings of Unity because at 19, it awoke me to a place of wanting to be alive. That,
Mm,
oh, okay, there is a universal God law that's on my team. And that,
uh-huh.
wow. So I was willing, to dedicate my life to that.
Mhm.
Because it's, what is that? Augmendino says, God, what you, no, what,
I,
God,
I,
your life, my life is my gift. And anyway, I haven't said it in a long time. You can tell
mhm.
everybody we're not scripted. My
Right.
life is your gift to me, and what I do with my life is my gift to you. There,
There,
we got it. We
you got
pulled
it.
it out.
You got it.
We pulled it
Yeah.
out. So back to you. It's 1991. You're on the Enneagram. And how did your path go with that?
Well, I started reading a lot about it. And Temple, I really used it for me to become
Mm-hmm.
more self-aware,
Mm-hmm.
develop more inner awareness. And it wasn't until 1998, perhaps, that I did seek certification, or 99. At any rate, 2000, 2001, I became a certified teacher. And I didn't teach before I was certified and held accountable for how I was learning the system. And so now I offer trainings, not trainings, but well, staff trainings, organizational trainings. I also do individual sessions on leadership or spirituality, and I do public workshops. Um, you know, who am I is such a foundational question.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I know me, the more effective I'll be in the workplace, the kinder I'll be in relationship. So it's a deepening of self-understanding. And along the way, it's important to be easy on ourselves, to have an acceptance, to have compassion for self, because without that, we don't go deeper.
Mm-hmm.
We plateau because it's scary in there. It's also beautiful, but we'll encounter both.
Mm-hmm.
And so to have um, practices of kindness to self are really important in this work.
It reminds me of when the teacher asked the children, she asked little Billy, how many directions are on a compass? And he said 5.
Mm.
And she said, 5? He said, yes, east, west, north, south, and where I am.
I love that.
I thought you would. You can use it in your training. I love that because it's almost like it's more than truth,
Mhm.
It's east, west, south, north. It's where I am because of everything evolving around that energetic field. And
Right.
as I'm listening to you and your competence and your energy and your authenticity, your of how you are and how you be and your languaging, your physiological self. When we are comfortable with ourselves, then there's it's an entirely different space
Yeah.
because things aren't threatening. Difference of opinions aren't intimidating.
Yes.
Um, it's an entirely different experience of just saying we agree to disagree
Mhm.
and let it be so. It creates a settled space of self-esteem, of
Mhm.
awareness. And
Mhm.
I feel that is often where for the moment, we grasp this sense of total inner peace because we're
Right.
comfortable with who we are. And
Well,
that's
it's like
what I feel from you. You're comfortable with
saying,
who you are.
I believe that to be true. Feels
Hmm.
that way to me.
Hmm.
Going back to little Billy Temple,
Yes.
it's like he's saying, and then there's here,
That's right. Yeah.
right here. And what I have found is that presence, to be present and available to myself, is necessary in order to work with this Enneagram map.
Mm.
Because if I'm not present, I'm not available. And when I'm not here, if I'm in north, east, south, or west, but I'm not here,
Right.
then that's when automatic patterns kick in.
Hmm.
But when I come into myself and there's presence, you get Sandra. If
Mm.
I'm not, you get the patterns of type 8.
Hmm.
So that's a real big piece, beginning point, really entry point into, well, as you know, any kind of self-exploration. Who
Yes.
am I? Who am I right now? And I grew up in a small town in rural North Carolina, and
What would
the
that
land,
be? What
the
would that
land,
be? What would the
uh,
town be?
a little town called Taylorsville in the foothills of North Carolina.
Hmm.
But there was lots of land to roam, and I had a horse or two.
Hmm.
But that became a part of my lineage now because that put me in my body.
Hmm. Oh, yeah, absolutely. We were very fortunate. The reason I asked is that I grew up in a small town outside of Anderson, South Carolina.
Yes, I
So
have a niece there. Yeah.
right. So my uncle taught in Clemson and,
Uh-huh.
all of that. So I have a great appreciation for nature
Mhm.
and land and groundedness and
Mhm.
I appreciated it more when I didn't have it.
Right.
You know,
Right.
when you're growing up, you don't go, oh, this is so wonderful living out in the country and nobody's around and how exciting. And I was exposed to, had access to a couple of horses too. So what a blessing, what
Yeah.
a gift. Yes.
If we keep talking, we'll probably find out we're kinfolk.
Yeah, in one way or another.
But it was like my grandmother had gardens, and like you say, when we're young, we don't appreciate that. And it's Sandra, go pick some beans for supper. And wouldn't it be lovely to do that today?
Yes, so
Yeah.
lovely.
Mhm.
Or to groom the beans so we could have them for supper. We'd have
Right.
to shell the peas and
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Kind of a meditative act, really.
Mhm. We participated with our food.
Mhm.
We
I love
participated,
that.
right? We participated.
Mhm.
It wasn't just out of a box or
Mhm.
put on a plate. It was a sacred. It was
Right.
sacred. Mm-hmm.
And so that was, for me, helpful in working with a grounded presence.
Mm-hmm. And it makes perfect sense that you would choose a tool like the Enneagram that would offer, because you know the value and how important that is.
Mm-hmm.
You also know that, millions of people do not have that. I'm out in the country shelling peas and getting beans for supper. And so it's a back door. It's another way of, really offering that.
Mm-hmm.
So in your work and then what you've been able to see and how couples are better, families are better, there's more connection in corporation and organizations once they understand, there's another quote you're going to want to take too. And it's from Mark Nepo.
Mm-hmm.
And I love his writings. And he says that what we reach for may be different. However, and he didn't say however, I just did that to make the point. What we reach for may be different. What makes us reach is the same.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Right? You can have that one too. Okay.
He's got some good stuff.
That's right. Between him and little Billy. But that's part of what you're doing, right? You're laying the groundwork to show the energy field of, what we reach for is really the same. It's to come from life with your heart. I always joke that when I'm not totally in my heart, that is not the right time to call customer service.
Right. Good point. Good point. So this really is about how we deepen our heart's capacity to love. And the Enneagram is a map that shows us what's getting in the way and the path to it. And the last sentence in my book, Temple, is, may love be our legacy. May love be our legacy. Yeah. And back to Mark Nepo, in his book of Awakening, I don't know what page number, but he talks about the word power. And he says, the way it's used today is the power to be able to. But the original definition was the power to be. And it's the power to be me. So
it's very different, isn't it?
It is. And so I took that word, and for each Enneagram type chapter, for 9, it's the power of claiming, because that's the path for 9. They can forget themselves. What's the power of claiming? And for 1s, it's the power of accepting, because they've got an eye for improving. And so things just aren't quite right. And so for each type chapter, it's the power of something, but it is that power to be.
What's the power of 8?
The power of 8 is the power of opening. 8's fear of vulnerability. We all do, but 8's got an extra dose of that fear. And so it's the power of opening, even in the face of unfairness.
Now I'm so curious. Maybe I need to set a time with you, because now I want to know, because I just don't remember.
We'll dig in. We'll do it. Yeah.
All right, that'd be great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, do you work with families and their children, or is it mostly adults? Or
I work with adults. Even though we do have our ego structure is in place by age 7, I believe professionals say, but we really need some lived experiences to observe ourselves, to understand which type we lead with. And I say lead with because we're not our type, unless I'm just on automatic and then I'm all over type 8 patterns. But to have enough lived experience to see yourself in different settings is helpful in discerning your type. But often parents of their daughters or sons who are graduating from high school and going to college, they'll say, I'd like to give them an Enneagram assessment with you as a gift. And so if that's the case, then what I do is I stress the strengths. Once we figure out which of the 9 types is their home base, I make sure to stress the strengths. And I say, when you're going for a college interview or a job interview, here are some things you can say because this is the type you lead with.
Mm,
You
that's
know,
wonderful. That's a really good idea. Tell us your website, Sandra Smith, so that people can go to it, because that's wonderful to have. And what a great gift, especially to people that don't need any more statues or mementos or
Mhm.
tchotchkes. What would
Yeah.
what would your website be that people can get in touch with you?
Well, my website is alchemyworksevents.com. So my business is
Alchemy.
Alchemy Works because it's the alchemy
Yes, of
of
course.
from fear to love. And in the Enneagram language, it might be something like from our vice to our virtue.
Yes.
But alchemyworksevents.com. Yeah. And
Alchemyworksevents.com.
.com.
Okay,
Yeah.
and there's a way to connect with you or connect with your team in order to get in touch
Right.
with you. Well, that
Right.
that's great to know. So one of the curiosities with me, as I know some of our listeners, is that with like Myers-Briggs, and I know more about the DIS program.
Yeah.
Um, but that being said, um, can you change from number to number? Can you become both and, or are you pretty much set? Explain all that to us with
Thank you. Yes, that's a good
wisdom, please.
question. Yeah.
Thank you.
And so, the Enneagram is different than DISC or Myers-Briggs because it isn't about behavior. It's about what's beneath the behavior that's driving it.
Okay.
So it's really a map of your internal operating system, which is your ego structure and its automatic patterns. So that ego structure is in place, as I said, by age 7, and it stays with us. But what we want to be able to do is see its patterns more quickly so we're not falling in the same hole. We walk down a street, we fall in a hole, we keep walking down the street, falling in a hole until we say, wait a minute, this is a bad pattern I've got going on, so I need to
Right.
shift it. And so the map of the Enneagram helps us do that. Um, so it's a lovely journey into the inner landscape. There are hundreds of miles in there and so much to learn, and the learning continues. I've been, gosh, since 91, reading, studying, and then teaching, and I still am learning things, Temple. It's just amazing the depth of this system. And that's that's what maybe some folks don't realize. They see it as a typology. Oh, I know my type. Well, I co-host a podcast, and in the podcast, I say, well, it's like finding the trailhead and not taking the hike. If you know your
Mhm.
type, that's fine, but that doesn't really do anything. So there's a real difference in learning and growing. And
Mm.
a lot of people want to learn about the Enneagram because it is fascinating. It's accessible. It's also very complex, and it's the complexity that gets left out of a lot of the conversations. And it's one of the reasons, Temple, that I wrote the book that I did, because it's a very practical guide. And the title is The Enneagram Map to Your Deeper Self, Living Beyond Your Type, because I just want to be free before I die,
Can you
right?
hold that up? Do you
Sure.
have it? Good. I'm so glad you do. And hold it
Yeah.
up for a minute. The
Yeah.
Enneagram map to your deeper self, living beyond your type.
Right.
That's powerful, and the colors are powerful. I love your book cover. Was it published or
Mhm.
did you self-publish?
No, it was published. The publisher did a great job with this cover. It's
I
just a
would
knockout.
say, yeah,
Yeah. So it was just
really is.
such a gift. Yeah, Hampton Roads was the publisher. And I think when people see the cover, they'll be attracted to it. At least I hope so.
Oh, of course, yeah. And a great title. A
It's
great title.
it's
Um,
length it's lengthy, but it says what I want it to say.
right. And you had to
Yeah.
go with that. You actually, you have to go with what you know to be true, you know?
It rang, it resonated. I mean, I heard it,
Mm,
and the publisher was fine with it, was good with it.
mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Well, I found for myself, in the early days, especially, that, we get into these platitudes and cliches and explanations and,
Mhm.
I'm a two or I'm this and that and labels. And yet that's the profoundness of what you're saying, is to go beyond the
That's right.
type. That can sound very impressive. And yet, unless you go deeper, integrate, impact,
Mhm.
affect others, it's just another conversation to have
Right.
over happy hour. I can be happy at happy hour, but I pretty much can't do anything else. But you get the point. So give us without giving us too much, because it's a brand new book, and we obviously know it will do very, very well. When you were writing the book, was there a clear, defined intention that you wanted to achieve? Like the person's read it, and then what? Was there any of that?
A lot of that,
Okay.
Temple. Thanks
Okay.
for asking.
Mm,
Because a lot of what I was hearing and reading had the Enneagram more superficial than what I know it to be.
okay.
And I wanted to bring some depth to it. And as I said before, we each are a unique expression of our type. We can't, this system doesn't pigeonhole. It's actually a system to free us from the box of the ego structure that we're in.
Hmm.
So part of this was helping people see type in different ways. I have practices and inquiry questions for each type. And I also decided, actually, as this was forming in my mind, Temple, I happened to just watch a documentary on Netflix of Amy Tan talking about when she wrote the Joy Luck Club, and that she wanted to tell her mother's story. And I thought, there needs to be other stories in this. And of
Hmm.
course, being trained in the narrative tradition where we learn from panels and stories of people, I invited two people of each type to write about a lived experience coming from the perspective of that type and how they've grown beyond some of the patterns.
Mm.
So the stories have a lot of heart, and um, they're not your stereotypical story. You know, people think, oh, you're an 8, you must be this.
Hmm.
Um, that just irks me.
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
so see the human, not the type.
Go deeper. Tell me why.
Exactly.
Why would it
Because
irk you? Tell me.
um, because that's pigeonholing.
Got it.
And that's not what the Enneagram is about.
Hmm.
It's a map to see how I trip myself up so that I can then work on the patterns so I'm less likely to trip myself up.
Got it. On
Yeah.
another level, it's a glorified excuse just to label but not move forward and go to anything deeper. Yes?
Yeah, well said. I remember I took in theology school, a course on feminist theologies, and the professor said, you know, the first act of oppression is a label.
Mm. Oh, we have so many of them now.
Right.
My brother and his wife, and I call her my sister, are here visiting, and we just have a wonderful time. And because it's like no holds barred, and we just share, what is up. And I said it often, I get so frustrated being labeled a gay person.
Mhm.
I said,
Mhm.
because I don't sit around, Nelson, and say, well, you're a heterosexual person. What do you expect? And
Yeah.
it's like a label puts people in a corner, and it's overgeneralizing, so many things that don't fit at all. are
Wow.
that it's like a big pile, and it does a tremendous disservice, because like you're saying, we miss out on the golden nuggets
Mhm.
that lie, really deep and, are like like in unity, there's no theology or science of mind. But yet there is. If you try to question people, they can get very defensive. Well,
Mm.
no, we believe blah, blah, blah. But so much of the platitudes and the lofty, but it's real work. It's real work, like you're saying, to dive deeper, to me, it's one thing to say, oh, I'm an 8, and I have issues with vulnerability, but to go deeper and go, how is that? And how can I shift and
Mhm.
how can I transform? And it's about the willingness to do the work. And being on this planet, I feel, requires us to do the work.
And we use labels and preconceived notions of who someone is because we're afraid.
Hmm. Well said. Say that again, sister.
And
Go
and it's
ahead,
how,
say it
yeah,
again.
it's how we keep a distance.
Hmm.
And so we use, as I said, if you're serious about that.
I was. I
Okay.
was. Oh, yeah.
Tipple. So we do use labels and preconceived notions of who someone is because we're afraid.
Mhm.
And
Wow.
when someone is different, more different than we are, maybe by skin color, sexuality, whatever,
Hmm.
um, we're going to project even more onto them and we get
Oh, yeah.
distance.
Hmm.
So, what are we afraid of?
Mm.
What are we afraid of? There's a question that I learned from an author, Stephen Walensky, and I use it in workshops. And it's a real eye opener and a heart opener. And here's the question: when judging yourself or another, what are you resisting experiencing?
Wow.
When judging yourself or another, what are you resisting experiencing?
Mm. That's powerful.
You take that question in and you do some work with it, and it is powerful
Hmm.
because you realize there's a lot we fear and we're judging so we don't have to feel the fear.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Now, when you're leading workshops and you're in groups, are there moments when people have just live right in the moment, these big aha moments like, oh my gosh, that's why I've been this way with my husband for I mean, do they have those kind of whoo? I mean, obviously it takes more than just an aha, right? But yet it's the beginning, yes.
There you go. It's the light turned
Mm-hmm.
on. And
Mm-hmm.
so it shows a little bit of the path now.
Mm-hmm.
I remember working, and I don't work with couples that much, but I was working with a couple who were both led with the body center of intelligence. And those are types 8, 9, and 1. And they know first through gut instinct and kinesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the body types, 8, 9, and 1, that are the most self-forgetting. And so this couple, both of them, it was either an 8, 9 couple or a 9, 1, I can't remember. But sitting there with them, I knew they were each self-forgetting and expecting the other to remember them. That doesn't work well.
Mm-mm.
And so it became very clear. I said, you know what? If you'll stop wanting the other to remember you and you remember you, you're going to be great.
Oh,
Something
that's
else will trip
powerful.
you up, but not this anymore.
No, that's
Because,
good.
yeah, there's an underlying
Hmm.
sensitivity in body types to being dismissed, but they dismiss themselves and they put that on others. It's an amazing framework to dive deeper.
Mm, I love that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I love the passion. That was part of this show has had a few names through the 15, however, 18 years.
Mm.
And But I love the name On Fire for Life because that's
Mhm.
I draw it from the statement by Howard Thurman, stop asking yourself what the world needs and ask yourself what makes you come alive. And to meet people like you that have such a deep dedication, there's a saying that there's a young graduate that is out of college and he's so excited and he knows all these new ways of scientific farming and irrigation, and he can't wait, and he goes and he visits the first farmer and he's just so happy and joyful, and he says, oh, I want to tell you all about this and I can help your farm and everything. And the farmer looks at him and goes, son, I appreciate it. I appreciate your fire, but I'm still learning how to do what I already know and how to do it better.
Oh,
And
how
I
about
I I love that you're talking about this isn't a fast track, it's a lifelong tool.
right,
A
right.
lifelong tool. And
Mm,
it's not I did it a couple of times and I didn't understand it. It's
mhm.
about really working with it and integrating it.
Right, requires staying power, really,
Mm-hmm.
because if we want to work through a pattern that's now a pretty solid neural pathway, we find a practice that counters that. It's really countering the reptilian brain at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of work, 3 times a day for 3 months, will start softening the pattern, but it
Mm-hmm.
takes discipline, and disciplines are how we love ourselves.
Yes.
One way we love ourselves.
Mm.
And I'm a big Howard Thurman fan myself.
Isn't that funny? I love how it unfolds, because there's no plan. And often, when people are listening to the show later or whenever,
Mm,
it's like, wow, and they must have met and talked. And no,
mhm.
it's just the way life shows up when you're open and you're willing to
Yeah.
be vulnerable. So I don't think either one of us are an 8.
Or maybe we both are, who knows?
Who knows?
Yeah. But, Thurman said something that just really struck me, and when I heard it, someone was speaking about Thurman. He had long been dead. But there are 3 types that are really task-focused, types 1, 3, and 8. I mean, we wake up with the list. We wake up thinking
Mhm.
about tasks. And Thurman called that a deadly magic.
Mm,
And I love
that's something to sit with. A deadly
yes,
magic. Wow.
because it feels like so good when you knock things off and get stuff done. And what have I sacrificed for the sake of getting it all done?
Mm,
Deadly magic.
wow. Deadly
Mhm.
magic. That's powerful.
Mhm.
We could just
Yeah.
write a quote book. We're just screaming them down but these are the tools and they help with the compass, right? And they help
Certainly.
folks grounded. And I think about that statement, what brings me fire,
Mhm.
what
Uh,
continues that. And some of it is the same answer I've always had, and others evolve into something different.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, what makes me come alive?
Mhm.
Um,
And for Sandra Smith, it's the Enneagram.
and it probably goes beyond that at this point because it's new insights that the work brings me.
Wow.
You know, it's 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 not just the Enneagram, it's digging in there.
Mhm.
It's exploring, it's asking questions, it's reflecting, it's learning from people. It's learning from trees. There's a hickory tree right outside here that is my first go-to for discernment.
Mhm.
To just listen,
Mhm.
bird song, you
Mhm.
know, in trying to counter the pattern of being a task-oriented type where I wake up, now what am I going to do? I go to my senses and I listen for birdsong. And I
Mm.
start with that. And that's a better way to start than I need to go and take care of this. So,
Isn't this saying, we always know we're okay as long as the birds are singing?
mm,
Isn't that what it is? It's because I heard it not long ago. I know that when there were storms when I used to live in Florida, we would watch the birds.
yes, they will tell you what to do.
They will tell you, what to do.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Are you familiar with the author and environmentalist Terry Tempest Williams?
No.
She has written many a book, but her latest is called When Women Were Birds.
Oh, that's powerful.
And she ends the book, as she does many of her books, with a powerful message. And in this one, it was the birds remember what we humans have forgotten,
Mm,
that the world was made for joy.
wow.
Yeah, yeah.
That's powerful.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, birds can be, if you want to use the word minister, but they minister to me.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I have hummingbirds in the backyard,
yeah,
and they're the only bird that can move forward and go backwards.
I know.
And that's just so powerful to watch them, for
Powerful
sure.
little things,
They
powerful
are.
things, and quite territorial. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yes.
But one of the other, another piece of the book is that I've attempted to weave psychology and and spirituality. And I
Mm.
bring the land in. Much of my spirituality is with the land.
Mhm.
Um, but I've written Sabbath keeping practices by type, which are days, whatever day you want to choose, when you do some things that go counter to the patterns.
Wow.
And then I've written prayers for each of the types. So it has a tone of um, in-depth reflective work, as
Mm.
well as moving from resisting to allowing, which is the title of the last chapter, which,
Wow.
if we can really be here now and present with ourselves and track our bodies, um, we will know what to do next.
Mm.
And often it's a wait, just wait. But could I read you, because now we're both into quotes and poetry, I'd love to read you a Rumi poem that
Well, girl, when are you gonna do it? Don't hold back.
so this is in I know, this is in the last chapter. I know you're gonna love this. The last chapter is resistance and receptivity. But a friend of mine shared this poem with me as I was ending the book, and I went, "Oh my goodness." So I close with blessings for each of the 9 types, and then I've written a blessing for the readers. But before all of that, this is Rumi. When I run after what I think I want, my days are a furnace of stress and anxiety. If I sit in my own place of patience, what I need flows to me, and without pain. From this, I understand that what I want also wants me,
Mm.
is looking for me and attracting me. There is a great secret here for anyone who can grasp it.
Wow.
I mean, I've read that poem several times, and it always touches me deeply. What I want wants me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, what we're seeking is seeking us, right?
Mhm. Mm.
Or as the sun is reaching towards the plant is also reaching towards the sun. Isn't that great?
Grandmother's green beans.
Grandmother's green beans. I know you can eat them, but you got to shell them. Or in your plate, in your thing, you gotta.
Mhm.
We had that yeah, there's something about the power of participation. It does. It makes you appreciate it so much more. And that's
Mhm.
what we're saying today with Sandra Smith, is the power of participation. That's what makes the transformative energy of the Enneagram really work. Is that you find out, you work with it, you dig deeper, you use it with others, you understand it, you talk about it, you think you understand it, then you forget that you understand it, so you can think about a new way of looking at it. That's what it's
Mhm.
about, right? It's Alvin Toffler said that, the issues in the 21st century aren't that people can't read and write, it's that they have difficulty unlearning, relearning, and learning again.
Mm,
Mm-hmm.
some wisdom there.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
love how you're saying it and defining it. It moves from knowing to showing. Well,
Well,
knowing
and
to growing to
I,
showing,
I
yes.
started to say growth is in there. And,
Mhm,
what I say in my book and as I teach the Enneagram, we want to really study the patterns of the type so we aren't reinforcing them.
mm,
I'm not studying patterns of type 8 because I think they're great.
mhm,
I don't want to reinforce them because I want to be free from them.
sure.
And that's the journey. That's the
Yeah.
journey with this map. If we're just using it as a type to find out our type, then that's really, there's no growth there.
Mhm,
And to grow, for me, type 8 has a lot of love for certainty. And I'm learning that the more I'm comfortable with uncertainty, the more options and creativity come my way.
mm,
And with
mhm,
with certainty, we put ourselves in an either or position, and there's no learning there.
mm.
And it feels like that's sort of where our country is these days, in an either or, and it doesn't serve anyone.
Oh, thank you. An
Yeah,
either or of extremities.
right, right.
And when you have an either or in your own life, or an either or in a bigger, picture or window, it's the avoidance of doing anything. It
Mhm,
it makes no sense. There's no movement because the rich is somewhere between the either and the or, but the both and it's so
mhm,
easy to avoid what one really needs to look at.
mhm, right.
It's
And
so
of
true.
course, all we have to do is take a walk in the woods to learn how diversity, how we need diversity,
Hmm.
and how creation celebrates diversity.
Yes.
And we're beginning to learn that, many of us, I think.
Yeah.
There's hope
It
there.
it is, and this times like this when we get to see the shadow work,
Mhm, mhm,
right? It's real
mhm.
real obvious of doing more shadow work. I think you and I are saying the same thing. You're saying when it's counter to that, and what I would say is I'm in my shadow,
Uh-huh,
and I'm
sure.
aware of the tools to bring in to bring the light back in. And
Mhm,
because of certain tools that can be used, whether it's a drum or a rattle or hugging a tree or putting bare feet on the ground or,
right.
whatever that is,
Mhm.
all of that, or walk a dog without a phone.
Right, right.
Or whatever it is that we carry around. I don't know somebody needs to invent a new name. It's not really a phone, it's a camera, it's, a magazine, it's a
It's our little buddy, I guess.
it's
It's
our
my
little
little
buddy.
but, there's not a lot of stillness or silence these days,
Mhm,
and we suffer for it
mhm. I
because
have to have it.
yes.
It's almost more important to me than food. I have to
Mm,
have silence. I really do because it is the layer about everything,
mm.
you know.
without it, we can't, our imaginations, I think, dry up.
Hmm.
We don't think as clearly,
Yeah.
and we can't reflect on our lives. We just report.
Hmm.
There's a big difference in reporting and reflecting.
Well, Angelus Arian would say too that we are in the shadow. See, isn't this amazing? I know, like, hello, yes, and I teach this, and I chose to teach it so I could be in it, right? And
Mhm.
of the visionary and the healer and the warrior, right?
Ah,
Right. And
don't.
it makes such a difference. But without silence, the teacher archetype, the shadow is self-righteous and controlling and all of that. Where when the teacher has the silence, it's the right people are here,
Mhm.
everything's happening in its right time, and all is well.
Mhm.
You know, that's worth a big dose of silence right there.
Boy, don't we miss Angelus Arian. Oh,
Mm, what a
mhm.
powerful being. Well, for those of you that have enjoyed this show, and I'm sure you have, and you want to know more about the Enneagram, Sandra Smith, it's been a great pleasure for us today. And would you please hold the book up again? And just hold it there for a moment. The Enneagram Map to Your Deeper Self, Living Beyond Your Type. God, that cover is just like so mystical. They did you a great service, Sandra Smith.
They sure did. And
They
I'm
really
grateful.
did.
I'm grateful. Yeah. Thank you for this time, Temple. It's been a joy to talk with you.
Oh, it's been a joy to talk with you. And
Mhm.
thank you. And I'm going to find out your information from Andrea so I can figure out what my number is and go
Well,
deeper than that, beyond my number.
that's right. Good for you. I will anticipate hearing from you then. Thank
I
you.
am signed up to be a lifelong learner, that's for sure. Thank
Great.
you so much, my friend.
Thank you.
My new friend from North Carolina.
There you go. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bless you. Bye bye.
You too.